Your winners and losers from New York. Big changes at Kia, but first, we're going to walk like mannequins.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Henkel, excellence is our passion.
This is Autoline After Hours with John McElroy, episode 282 for April 10th of 2015. Rini, Steve, and the safety strut. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific or 19 hours GMT. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. Gary Vasilash. We'll get to that in a minute, but...
The Bengals reference?
Yeah. Hey, you're healthy, you're back, you're alive.
Yeah.
Thank goodness, man.
Boy, that was a tough one last week. That bronchitis, and I did have the flu shot, so I just want people to know that you got to get the flu shot and you still get sick. But
That's what they said this year. They got that thing wrong.
yeah, so it was tough.
And we got to let everybody know we got Jeff Gilbert from WWJ News Radio 950 with us. Jeff,
right.
great having you here.
Everyone will recognize that voice.
I guess so.
They
know why I have a face for radio.
But we have to let everybody know that our special guest in the studio right now is Rini Sherony, a senior principal engineer at Toyota. And Rini, it's awesome to have you here with us at Autoline.
Thank you very much for having me here. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Now, some of the people already saw the dummies walking, and we'll get into that in a moment here, but you do a lot of safety research at Toyota, and Toyota's also started something that I think is unique in the industry. I certainly haven't heard it. It's a collaborative research center?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yes, so I currently work at Toyota's Collaborative Safety Research Center, or in short, CSRC. So CSRC started in 2011, and our uniqueness of this center, which I also don't know anybody has it currently, is everything we work on, we share it on an ongoing basis. We don't even wait for it to get finished. As we come up with new technologies, new ideas, concept, we constantly share it with all the safety communities, because the main goal for our center is not just to benefit Toyota, but to benefit everybody who wants to improve the safety on the roads.
So this is a $50 million research center that Toyota has established.
That's correct.
So what are the things that go on, and how many people work there, and what do they do every day when they go to work?
Absolutely. So we have around 6 or 7 people who are full-time at Collaborative Safety Research Center. In addition, we have over 12 people who are part-time CSRC project, and then part-time they do product development or product evaluation. So they at CSRC, so I'll tell you my life. I have over 7 projects. I am the lead for all active safety and data analysis related projects. So data analysis is really critical, because when you are trying to develop a system or trying to do any standard, you need to know what's going on the real roads. So you have to analyze those data, whether there's crash data from police reports or naturalistic driving data. So we do that data analysis. We have a full-time data analyst who work at our center. In addition, we use a lot of analysis results from our collaboration partners. So we work on these projects very closely with the partners day to day. So day to day, we have regular meetings with them, WebEx. We review technical papers. For example, for my projects, over 7 projects, we have so far around 45 technical papers. And technical papers are a great way to share it with the safety community, with other engineers and researchers, and they get so excited about these new ideas, concept, applications, and they can also utilize it so it spreads very quickly, not only in this country, in other countries like Europe and Asia.
Now, of course, this is a very competitive industry, and I know you have research that is proprietary as well. But what's the advantage of having this research that is open, and how do you decide which research is going to be wide open that you're going to collaborate with, and which is the research that you want to keep proprietary?
So Collaborative Safety Research Center, where I work, everything is open and sharing. That's why CSRC was set up. We also have our traditional research where I don't work on it so much anymore, which is completely confidential and proprietary, and that's basically for product development and product application. The CSRC research are primarily focused on problems that is not just Toyota product. It's the safety issue, like driver distraction, crashes. These are, everybody's facing it. It's not just Toyota. So we want to address those problems. We look at all the gaps in the current situation. We talk with federal agency. We talk with universities, other people who are working safety, and then we come up with these ideas. Now, we don't do open call because open call usually results in hundreds of ideas throwing at. We just talk one-on-one with people at conferences, people we know who are experts in this area, and from that we create a statement of work and we do contract with individual partners. Contract means you have specific deliverable at different time gaps, and on an ongoing basis we discuss what the outputs, how we do this, how we address this. So it's a very close partnership with these collaboration partners, which are not only universities. We have worked with medical schools, and also we constantly talk with the federal agencies because they are also have a lot of strong expertise in the safety issues.
You said active safety. So is the goal that you don't have accidents, and passive safety is taking care of the problem after it happens, and active is to prevent it?
So passive safety obviously came much before active safety. So passive safety is going on from mid-90s. We have seat belts, airbags, and a lot of structural improvements. And the amount of improvement we can do on passive safety sort of plateaued. But even with passive safety improvements, there is, don't get me wrong, it has a great benefit. We have reduced so many fatalities. And we used to be at times, I think, 50 or 60,000 fatalities. It has come down to 32,000. But for several years now, it has not shown a significant drop of the number of fatalities and injuries on U.S. roads. That's where active safety came into view. My mom used to say prevention is better than cure. So if you can do a warning or a prevention of the crashes, then that's the best situation. So that's where active safety comes into view, because absolutely we want to reduce the crashes and fatalities and injuries as much as possible. And it's not just Toyota, all OEMs and so many suppliers all working towards the same common goal.
Rini, you brought a couple of examples of some of your work. Why don't you get up and show us what you brought to the studio here?
Absolutely.
Because it's pretty unique.
So I brought with me Steve and Steve Jr., our new pedestrian pre-collision system testing dummies, or articulated mannequins. So first I want to clarify, these mannequins are primarily used for outside of the vehicle. They are very different from the current crash dummies, which people are familiar with. They do not have any sensor in them to measure anything. These are primarily to test how the systems, which are the pedestrian pre-collision systems, perform in real-world situation. And that is why it's so important these mannequins represent real people from every aspect, from the sensor, from how they move. Some of the unique characteristics is, first, the Steve's skin. So this looks like just some green fabric, but if you look inside this green fabric, there is a metal which is weaved into it. The reason we did that, because when people walk across in front of the car walking along, this radar reflection, the radar sensor, which is part of the pre-collision system, picks up those human. There is a return, comes back to the receiver on the car, and then it tells, yes, it's the human. So you need the same return from the mannequin. So we scanned 10 different people of real shapes and sizes, including men, women, and children. And from that, we created a model of how this radar return should look. And we implemented that model into the skin of Steve. And after we did that, we took it back and rescanned it. make sure that we did a correct job in doing the model. And we did have to tune a couple of times. It was not perfect in the first time we did the skin. So now it's all done. So this radar reflection from the skin is very similar to a real person. So when we're testing with it, the results reflect to what you'll see on real roads when a real pedestrian is crossing the road. In addition, the camera sensor, which is also integrated part of the pedestrian pre-collision system, looks at human shapes and size. Camera doesn't have any return. It looks into the outline, the shape, its motion, which is called tracking between frames. So this need to do a real shape and also motion. So the articulation or the motion of the arm and leg of Steve and Steve Jr. is very similar to real people. And we actually analyzed real person's hand, leg motion and gait motion. And from that, again, created models, computer models. And those models are implemented into the control system, which is now controlling these motors. Steve has 6 motors, which controls the different part. And if you come back here, I will show you in the back. It has the central controller, which controls all the motors, and a battery pack. Because when you're testing, you don't want Steve to be limited by a power cord. So there's a battery pack, which lasts for several hours when you are doing the testing, and it's all embedded in the mannequin itself.
But Steve can't walk, can he?
So Steve can do articulation, and then the actual walking, which is the crossing, currently is done by an overhead gantry. So the gantry is designed to pull it, and then Steve does the articulation. So overall to the system, it looks like a person crossing across. Now, to make things simpler, we are developing the next generation system, which is not a big gantry, a very simple skateboard, which is remotely controlled. So we can even run Steve right here in the studio without much setup time.
And you mentioned Steve Jr., so obviously you're, as part of all your investigative reporting here, or not reporting, investigative development, you've got a child as well.
Absolutely. That's very important because there is significant number of children involved in crashes with the vehicle. So the current specification of our system addresses children, but we have to make sure that truly they can detect children. Especially, a lot of children crashes happen when they're running, so they move much faster. Adult crashes, from the crash data analysis, we haven't seen much running. For children, how NHTSA codes it dart and dash, means they're running suddenly in front of the car. And that's why we developed the little mannequin, which is Steve Jr. It's very similar to the adult Steve, but obviously the shape and sizes are done based on real children, and the radar reflection is similar to a little kid, and it has the capability of moving faster. The articulation of the leg goes much faster in the hand than the big Steve, so that when we're testing with the little Steve, it can do the running motion.
Are we seeing a change in the kind of pedestrian accidents? I noticed when I was at the New York Auto Show last week, there are a lot of people on the street that are paying a lot more attention to their smartphones than they are to the traffic around them. Is that having an impact, and is that something you're studying?
So what we saw from the real crash data analysis, that in US in particular, the pedestrian crashes have been increasing steadily. So it used to be several years ago close to 9-10%. Now it has gone up to 14%. And if you look into the factors, there is some distraction issues involved. Now, police doesn't always report very clearly that the pedestrian was walking with the iPhone, but distraction could be caused by some of these devices which people are looking at. In addition, we also saw a significant number of pedestrian crashes where the pedestrian was intoxicated, and it happened at night. So that is also a big factor, especially for fatal pedestrian crashes.
Rini, come on back over here with us, and thanks for demonstrating how those dummies work. And if you've got a full-size adult and a child, what else are you working on? What's next?
So this project is almost completed, like I mentioned. Our next thing to look at the bicyclist, because that's also a big issue. Bicyclist crashes have also been increasing in US, and there's already a significant number of bicyclist crashes in Japan and in Europe, in other countries. So we have to address that particular crash type. So we have looking into the radar scanning, similar to the pedestrian, of bicycles, and you see it in the picture. That's our prototype bicyclist surrogate. It's not completed with. We just completed radar scanning of 7 different bicycles of different shapes and material, because material does play a key role in the radar return. Like carbon fiber bike, which my boss rides, and we scanned it, the return from that is different from a regular, very metallic, inexpensive street bike. So we have to make sure that the surrogate has all those components. So anytime we do a testing with it, it's just representation of real bikes and bicyclists on the road.
So now do you, when you get this, when you get all this data together, what's the next step? Do you develop radars and cameras that maybe look out a little bit further and warn you a pedestrian is about to approach, pay more attention, a bicyclist is about to approach? Do you work on auto braking systems that might stop for a pedestrian? Design that might mitigate injuries, or is it a combination of all of that?
Absolutely, it's a combination of all of that. Like, as I said, CSRC is open and sharing. So some of this mannequin development and the bicyclist mannequin, we just don't have to use just for us. Anybody can use it for their testing. This is a standardization activity, which Toyota are proactively working on it. In fact, we have so many interest in the pedestrian mannequin for standardized testing that my collaboration partner, Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis, IUPUI, they created a spin-off company so people can purchase the mannequin from them. We're also making the design public for free. So if anybody wants to take the design and build on their own, they can do it. So it's enhancing safety for everyone. And of course, we take a lot of these outputs and apply it to internal product development and improvement, which you talked about. That activity also goes on in parallel.
That's pretty cool what you're doing, and that's why I think it's so unique, and that's why we wanted you on the show, that there's already a spin-off company, not associated with Toyota at all, right?
We don't benefit anything out of it.
And making this really kind of open source research.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Because again, CSRC goal is to open and sharing and benefit and enhance safety on the roads.
Okay, what about animals? You going to protect my little doggies?
I would love to. I'm a dog lover myself. I have 2 dogs. But we are working on something more severe, which is the deer vehicle crashes. Large animals, they can cause severe injuries and even fatalities when impacted. So I am working on a project on deer animal crashes, and we went to a deer farm, which is in Michigan. I think it's half an hour from Ann Arbor, which is our technical center is. And our partner is Michigan Tech Research Institute, located in Ann Arbor. And we scanned over 30 deers of different shapes, sizes, and colors. And right now in the process of creating a model for a deer. And that model could be used for not only for internal product application, but we will share that model with outside community so anybody can use that for their product development or creating a surrogate.
Are you going to have to create a fake deer hide that the system will recognize?
So we can definitely. So we will have all the data available after we complete that project to create a deer surrogate, which could be used for deer testing.
So I mean, you're talking about creating these models. The thing I don't understand is, does the model reside in the controller in the car? So when the radar return comes back, it basically says, well, it doesn't look like this, doesn't look like, oh, this is what it is, it's a person?
So the model is used for a couple of different things. Yes, it's of course, can be and is used in the system development, which you are talking about. So the system can recognize it's a deer and not something else, or it's a pedestrian and not a floating bag. But in addition, the model is used to create the test surrogate, which is the standardization activity. And that's really important for the safety community, because when you want to test how the system works, and everybody wants to do, and you would want to do with something which is technically developed using real things, not just come up with some, build something looks like deer, but does it reflect the radar as deer? So people don't take that approach. We are the first ones who are taking that approach and making the development for these standardized testing objects could be used by anybody.
Because a couple of weeks ago, I was at a test track, a supplier test track, and there was a dummy that was on a gantry that was pulled across, and it was not as sophisticated as this. And the whole thing was to do automatic braking.
Yes,
and
exactly.
it worked.
Right,
Okay.
right.
But so this takes it even further.
This takes it even further, exactly. Like a lot of people have used not such a technical steps, but they created like a balloon mannequin or something. But the problem is when you are testing with that, although it worked that situation, you can't say for sure that the results are a representation of real world, because those mannequins were not developed using real human data. So and that's why we wanted to go one step further and make sure we use real human data every step of the way to develop these test mannequins.
And Rini, I'm looking back at Steve, the big one now, and he's got like these fringes hanging off his feet, you know.
Right.
I'm sure that's not for style.
He's from the 60s.
Yeah, he's a hippie dummy. What's that all about?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we want to avoid false braking activation. So one thing, the camera, when it looks at objects in front of it, the camera, which is the part of the pedestrian pre-collision system, it checks whether the object it's looking at and tracking is touching the ground. So the only way to achieve it with Steve is to have those fringes which are soft. So you could test on a crown surface, and when it's hanging, those fringes makes it always touching the ground. To the camera, it looks like a person on the ground walking.
And kind of a stupid question, but how'd you get the name Steve? Is that an acronym? Was it modeled after a guy named Steve? Does he have a
No.
lovely wife, Edie?
No, so the Steve name came with one of the graduate students working on our project. He really wanted to name it Steve, and that's not his name. His name is Jason. So we are like, why not? Let's pick Steve, but it's not an acronym for anything.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds to me like somebody's got a friend who's a dummy.
Yeah.
But this is a very smart mannequin, so don't underestimate its capabilities.
Rini, thanks so much for coming on Autoline After Hours and for bringing Steve and Steve Jr. Very interesting, and kudos to Toyota for doing this collaborative research.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Again, thank you for having me.
We'll be back in a moment here.
With those clocks, it's amazing to me.
Well, that's pretty cool, and I love the fact that these dummies here operate wirelessly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no wires or anything running to that.
Yeah,
So-
Toyota's really putting a lot of money into this because, you know, this initial $50 million they announced late last year, they're supplementing it with $35 million more to continue to do more programs in the
Plus, you
area of
mentioned all these
safety.
partners that are working with them, too. I'm sure they're contributing something to it as well.
It's just,
And people outside of the industry, too. That was an
That's
area
the
that
most
is
interesting.
very important because that brings you new ideas, new feedback, and maybe some out-of-the-box thinking.
Yeah. Hey, just another word to the audience. We'd love to hear what you all thought were the winners and the losers at the New York Auto Show. We'll get into that later in the show, but again, I'm just sort of greasing the skids here, getting things going. Speaking of the New York show, did you guys hear about this poster that some rogue person started hanging up that was really insulting to Mary Barra? It's really weird. Somebody who was at the show sent me a cell phone photo that he took of it. Jalopnik actually reported on this, but it's weird. It showed Dan Ammon, the president of GM, like in bed, and Mary Barra serving him breakfast. She's like in a bathrobe, and we got it up here now, and it made it look like it was almost a promo for Dan Ammon's speech at the New York show to the media, and so it says she may be a CEO, but it's still Ammon's world. And it's like, wow. And the New York people, the show organizers, are furious about this. I hear, I don't know if it's a fact because I contacted GM. They haven't contacted me back, but they're investigating. Who the hell put this up?
This was during public days or press days?
No, during the press days. And
Well,
somebody
Dan
had,
Ammon was a breakfast
Right,
speaker,
no, I understand that, but I was
obviously.
just wondering whether that was...
so somebody ran out that morning and plastered these posters all up and down the sidewalk leading up to the Javits Center. And
Any idea what the motivation would be behind it? Because I'm trying to go
it's-
through my head.
To me, it's really insulting to Mary Barra.
Right.
To me, this is an enemy of Mary Barra, and they went to some trouble. It's actually artistically well done. It's professionally printed. You know, I heard that there was a whole bunch of them all over the place, and they got ripped down immediately as soon as I don't know if it was the GM people or the organizers saw it. They went out and ripped the things down.
You might look at it from the point of view of it's not somebody who's against Mary Barra, it's somebody who's against Dan Ammon, because how does that make him look in this situation?
I like the way you think, Gary.
I mean, just turn this around. I mean, so suddenly it's like, wait a minute, you know, if you're her, do you say, wait a minute, is this how this is perceived? Is this how this is?
Well, I don't think your average person outside of the auto industry knows who Dan Ammon is. Mary Barra has been on Capitol Hill. Her name was out. I mean,
Over Time magazine.
Yeah, all over the place.
Right.
But other than people who are inside the industry and cover it every day, nobody has any idea who he is.
Right.
And why somebody would do this is a mystery to me. And I don't, if I look at it, I don't even get the idea of it. It's artistically beautiful, but to actually make a point and say, okay, what are they saying, that he's pulling the strings and she's the little puppet? I mean,
I don't know.
I've heard nobody mention anything like that.
To me, you know, when I first saw it, I thought, well, this is just in poor taste. And then the more I thought about it, if somebody went to great trouble to do all this, to me, that's the sign of a sick mind. And if I were GM, I would investigate it. Who knows what kind of crackpot is out there, right? So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there because I hadn't seen much about it. And Gary, I know you wanted to talk about Tesla.
Yeah, so okay, the first thing that strikes me about this company is that, isn't it amazing how much we talk about Tesla, and yet they're such a small company? I mean, the effect that they have is so much greater than the size of anything that they have done. And why do you think that is?
Well,
Jeff?
first is the stock price. And second is the fact that they are not a conventional car company, so that immediately sparks interest. And the third is Elon Musk, because he is the champion of all champions when it comes to being a self-promoter. And I don't mean that as an insult, I just mean that as a fact. He is very good. People know who he is. So you put all of that together, because I've kind of thought about this, that, you know, GM did the Chevy Volt to kind of out-Prius the Prius, and the Chevy Volt was pretty much blown away by the Tesla Model S. It became the latest it car. So there's always something out there that the non-automotive people look at it as the icon, and today that's Tesla.
You know, and it's funny because you know, I looked, so as you reported on the website, that Tesla reported its first quarter sales, something that you know, they hadn't been doing. They hadn't been reporting the numbers like all the other car companies do on a regular basis. So they sold a whopping 10,300 vehicles in the first quarter. So I checked. So the aforementioned General Motors, Buick LaCrosse first quarter sales, 10,199 cars. 210 car difference. No one talks about the LaCrosse, okay? Everyone talks about the Model S, right?
But you know, I think the real reason Tesla punches way above its weight is it's breaking every convention in the business, starting right with their battery pack. They use, you know, those cylindrical batteries that everybody else in the industry will tell you it just can't work and it's not the way to do it, and they've made it work. You know, they're the first ones to have a 200-mile, 250, 60, 70-mile car. No one's done that before. You know, the direct sale thing, trying to pull an end run on the franchise system. That's breaking all the conventions. These over-the-air updates that they're doing, where they're not just reflashing a computer, they're adding capability to a car. And one thing that Elon Musk said that just really hit me is, you buy a Tesla, and it just keeps getting better and better and better. More capabilities, you know? And this is free, over-the-air kind of stuff.
Right.
And no one in the industry is doing any of the things that I just mentioned. And I think that's why there's so much fixation on what Tesla is doing.
The other thing is, they are considered by the general public to be a tech company, and still by the general public's perception, auto companies are thought of as old factory auto companies. So they've positioned themselves well. They're in California, not Detroit. And you put all that together, they're the shining little new object in the auto industry, has the been there, done that.
So do you see this being eclipsed anytime soon?
Maybe if the bubble bursts and the stock price drops, that would be the big disaster that might change people's perceptions.
But isn't it that the car is so phenomenal. The car has these capabilities. The car has this ability to be, upgraded over the air. The car's, all-wheel drive. The car's 240-mile range. I mean, you have all these. So even if the stock just like collapses, you still have that.
Well, look, let's see what happens with the Model X. It's still a company that's not making money. They're scaling up, and
that little thing.
That little thing. Their losses are growing, but of course, everybody's looking towards the future as to what could be. I've been a skeptic, not of electric cars' potential somewhere down the road, but their near-term success is, well, look, you'll just look at the results. It hasn't happened. The other real key to remember is, most of the Teslas going out the door are $100,000 cars. So we can compare it to the Volt all day long. It's a totally different classic car. It should be a better car. It's right now, almost 3 times the price of a Volt. The real question will be, once they get the Model X out there, once they scale it up, does it cannibalize S sales, or does it grow the overall business? Because at some point, Tesla has to start not just generating profit, but lots of profit to continue to fund its product development.
Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting thing to look at from the point of view of...
But you also have to realize that most of the people who are amazed by Tesla have never been in one of their vehicles. They don't have the income to drive one. It is aspirational. It's out there. It's something that's really cool, but it's not necessarily something that they would own. It's an image kind of thing. It's a wow kind of thing.
See, but I think one of the things is, and you sort of put your finger on this before, the California, the tech company thing, and I was reading a review of the Model S 85D today. That's the 4-wheel drive version, and it was a very interesting car review. The guy was very excited about it. And this was on TechCrunch, which is a technology website, okay? They don't review cars, okay?
Right.
They review Teslas, and that's pretty much it, right?
But that's to Jeff's point.
And it's exactly to his point. And
the
it's
people
just
who buy that car and not reading Car and Driver or Motor Trend.
Exactly. And so the thing of it is this point to, so as we begin to have the Bolt and as we begin to have other vehicles that come from other companies that are electric, does that change the industry overall? And this guy was basically the Henry Ford of it. I guess I'm exaggerating. I
don't think so.
Some.
It was interesting because I went out to this graphics conference 2 years ago in Silicon Valley, and I'm looking at all the software and computers. It's all the latest, graphic processors and blah 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 blah. Every company there to show how good or crisp their graphics were and what they could do with it. They didn't have jets or military or architecture. It was all automotive, 100% of it, and it was all Lamborghinis and McLarens and Tesla. So I think, you're going to see the techies into Tesla, but why? It's a fast, cool, high-performance car. So as the Lamborghinis and the McLarens and those brands get into it, I think those tech readers will be interested. Maybe not so interested in the new Bolt. Temporarily, it'll be, what do they do there? And then, okay, where's the real
Well, again, you get back to the same thing with the Lamborghini and Tesla. It's something that is not easily attainable. The Bolt, you'll be able to get any day you want. I mean, look at the day's supply of the Chevy Volt. I mean, the story today that they're having to idle the line.
Days,
longer.
Days.
Yeah, but
So is this to sell down the old ones?
Yes.
It's to sell down the old ones. And
hey, but look, everyone's talking about that. Look at all the plug-ins and electrics. With very few exceptions, very high day supply.
right, again, you get
Very
back to
high.
the Tesla's unattainable, these are attainable. People want what they can't get.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, jumping topics here. What do you guys make of Michael Sprague at Kia getting this whopping big promotion?
Good for him. He's a
deserved
nice
that.
guy. I mean, we've had him on the show.
Right.
He's very affable. He's very knowledgeable. I think
But that's not why he got this promotion. Because he's affable and nice and been on the show, but...
Well, I think maybe the last part. I mean, but no, but I mean, it seems to me for those of us who are dealing with executives at car companies and dealing with people at Kia. I mean, he's the guy. He's the go-to guy. He's the guy you talk to. Okay, he's the guy who is the face of that company in the United States and has been for some time. And I think that's why he got the job.
But no, I would totally agree. I mean, what I found interesting was, he's gone from, I guess he's a vice president or something. I don't know his exact title, but he's been a marketing guy, right?
He's a vice president of sales and marketing.
Sales and marketing guy,
Right.
who is now the chief operating officer, COO.
Whole new title. They didn't
Whole new
have that
title,
before.
whole new, span of responsibility. And that tells me Kia did not want to lose this guy. And I think he got the job, not for all the reasons that you cited, but the big thing is, boy, has he delivered the results.
Right. Take a look at their marketing. Their Super Bowl ads have been memorable. Everybody knows about the hamsters. And Kia's image was horrible for many years. I mean, people still would ask me, what does KIA stand for from the old days? And now he has totally changed that image. It's sporty, it's upscale, it's cute and cuddly. And, there was a brand that had a very different image a decade ago.
Really did, yeah. It was just not even, I was going to say cheap and cheerful.
But there was nothing cheerful.
Drop the cheerful part.
Remember the Spectra?
Oh, my God.
So here's a case where somebody is getting rewarded for doing good work and for working hard at doing it, because you got to believe that must have been a thankless job for a lot longer than anybody would want to admit, and he endured. And
Well, a lot that's helped is, when they got Peter Schreier in there and he changed the styling around, all of a sudden you went, hey, that's a good-looking car. And now they're starting to make them substantial. So they're not just good-looking.
Right.
They're pretty substantial products right now. And then you sprinkle some brilliant marketing on it, and things really start to work. But one of the things that I read into this promotion is, boy, they don't want to lose this guy. They gave him a whopping big promotion. And But like you said, Gary, he totally deserves it.
Well, of course, the pressure's on now, though. So now you got to really.
I have a feeling that for Hyundai Kia, the pressure's on for those guys.
That's true, too.
That is probably unlike the pressure that's on. I mean, not to diminish what everyone else feels, but I mean, you just get this feeling that, man, those guys are really busting it to make it happen for their companies.
What did you guys make of these World Car Awards, Gary? I know that's something that really caught your eye.
Well, I just sort of thought it was very interesting. Two things that struck me. So this was like you guys do the North American Car of the Year awards. This is global, so they're looking at all cars, so credit to Ford. Ford Mustang was on the short list for World Car of the Year award, but it lost to the Mercedes C-Class. And the other car that was up was the Volkswagen Passat. But I always find it interesting, it's not the Passat that we have. It's the German Passat, which has been winning all kinds of design awards of late. But you take Mustang off the list, there's no other American car that made the list.
Well, if you notice, all of the winners and all of the subcategories are European, and I've noticed over the years, European vehicles tend to win this award far more than others, and I'm not saying that the judges are Eurocentric, but there tends to be among this panel, in my impression, a very large appreciation of the way European cars are put together. So I kind of figured the Mustang probably didn't have much of a chance. The C-Class is a wonderful car, but it also, it's gone up in terms of content, but it's also gone up in terms of price as well. So, when people are paying that kind of money for a vehicle, it's easy to make it a wonderful car too.
Well, and there was no Japanese cars on.
No Japanese
right.
cars.
Come on. I mean, come on. And this is the problem I think I have with the award. I think the rules are that to be a world car contender, you have to be sold in 2 continents?
On 2 continents, yeah, because they announced that. I was wondering what the criteria were.
Have any of the Europeans driven the Mustang? Have any of the Chinese driven the Mustang? I mean, once you right off the bat say, oh, it's got to be sold all around the world, boy, have you narrowed down the list of cars that are contenders. And then I seriously question whether their jury has really driven these vehicles. I just don't believe that they have. And so I don't put a whole lot of credence in this award, he said, as a member of the North American Car of the jury.
I was thinking, as another member of that jury, I gave more points to the Mustang than the Golf in the North American Awards. So maybe I'm a little biased in that as well.
Well, the Golf didn't make the short list for the World Car of the Year. The Golf,
Because we got it a year old, right?
Right, I was going to say, I think it won a
probably
previous
voted
year.
on it last.
Well,
think
the
it
Golf,
won
the
last
Golf
year or the year
GTE
before.
was on the short list for the World Green Car, but the BMW i8 won that, and the other being the Mercedes-Benz
Now,
S500
did the BMW
plug-in
i8
hybrid.
win because it costs a lot of green to get one?
That's quite the possibility.
I had
there.
one, but boy, that is an interesting car.
I'm looking forward. I'm going to drive one in about 2 weeks, and I'm really looking
yeah,
forward to it.
you know, just try to get past getting in and out of that car.
The one I really liked that one was the Citroen C4 Cactus.
The Cactus.
The one with the polymer insets on the doors.
Yeah.
That is quite an unusual look that only the French could pull off. And
Right. So have any of the non-European jurors driven a Cactus? Is the Cactus even on sale yet?
Yeah,
I think it was. I think
yeah.
they debuted at the Paris show, or the Paris show, right? No, Frankfurt show.
Frankfurt show.
It was a
How did it get that
concept.
name?
The Cactus.
Oh,
'Cause
Citroen
nobody else took it.
Oh, okay, I guess.
They have some
But I
wacky
mean,
names.
how many cacti are in France?
Like none,
Oh,
to
okay.
my knowledge.
Yeah, there we go. There's a
Okay.
picture of it. Look at that.
Okay,
Yeah.
So obviously no door dings.
Well,
that's true.
not where that pad is.
Right. So it's shopping cart height.
Yeah.
So that's what you got to look for in a car like that.
So I don't know. It's kind of interesting to see who won and who was on the finalists and all that. But I wonder how much credence the automakers put into that. Are they going to run around beating their chest?
Hell, if I were Mercedes, I'd be beating
Yeah.
my chest left, right, and center. They end up winning 3 out of 5 categories.
Do they need it?
I'd beat my chest anyway. What the hell? I mean, as long as they spell the name right. Yeah, speaking of the world, though, I mean, it's got this thing from IHS Automotive today about the Russian auto sales.
They're-
and this is a quote. I've never read a quote like this ever before. The Russian light vehicle market is currently undergoing something of an existential crisis. Existential crisis? I mean, it's like Sartre writing this thing. As a unique combination of macroeconomic and political circumstances are completely undermining any possibility of positive sales growth in the market. Any possibility?
Well, I mean, the Russian market has been hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold for several years now.
And now it's
like
frozen.
Siberia.
Frozen,
It's
yes.
frozen. Right, yeah. Yeah,
Bring
no,
back
that
the
was
Lada.
pretty interesting. Hey, we're going to take another quick break here, give a shout out to our sponsor, Henkel. We really like the sponsors of the show. We got to make sure that they get their word in. We got a lot more to talk about, especially New York.
A little chemistry goes a long way, especially when it comes to vehicle development. From enabling the use of alternate materials to withstanding extreme vehicle environments, Henkel's adhesive, sealants, and surface technologies provide solutions for every vehicle segment. Come see for yourself. Our Detroit area headquarters offers 12 research and development and testing laboratories with the ability to do full-range testing and validation on actual vehicle parts. Sign up to tour our labs at henkelna.com/tour.
Well, last week, the show was all about what was going on at the New York show. But, sometimes it's always worth going back and taking another look with some distance in time. And Jeff, what stood out at the show for you?
Well, I think Lincoln made a lot of ground with the Continental. It was a beautiful car. I think that Bentley brouhaha actually took something that was a Sunday night event and allowed it to go into the week. I mean, I wouldn't mind if I did a car having it compared to a Bentley. It's not like Renault's Cactus said you stole our design. And, I would really say they were the winner of the week, not just because they had a cool vehicle. Second, because just about everything I heard about the name Continental coming back was positive. And people who aren't even into cars are like, oh, they're bringing back the Continental. That's cool. I would say the loser would be Fiat Chrysler because they just didn't have anything there. And this was a big show with a lot of products, and most of the products were good. And they were like, what have you got? What can you talk about?
Yeah, good point. They had nothing. Gary, anything?
Well, so being back here while you guys were there, So it's a different way of looking at
It
the
is,
show.
right.
I mean, so you have a different sense of what's going on, and it really seemed as though you had the Continental, and then you had the Cadillac CT6, and nothing else mattered. I mean, they could have just stopped reporting from the show at that point after the Cadillac was announced. Now, what I find very interesting about those two cars is that the Continental is the Continental concept. The CT6 is a real car,
McCoy, right?
And the thing that strikes me about that car, though, and I know you guys talked about it on the program, and I think we're gonna have Dave Leone, the chief engineer for Cadillac, on the show here coming
next
up
month or a few weeks anyway.
But anyway, that it almost seemed as though it gets its kudos as an exercise in engineering, and in fact, Maverick one of our viewers, says that the winner of the show is a CT6 for engineered materials manufacturing and design. Nobody buys a car for engineering materials manufacturing and design. I'm sorry.
Maverick does.
Possibly. But you see what I'm saying? It's just like, so everybody's looking at so you look at the Continental and you say, what a beautiful car that is. What a magnificent job. Look at the interior of that car. They've done a fabulous job on that, right? And then when you talk about the CT6, you say, damn, look at those aluminum extrusions. That's awesome. Oh my God, look how much adhesive they've used. No one buys a car for that.
But I think people do buy cars, even if they don't know much about them, if they believe the engineering behind it is superior to everything else. I mean, Audi's tagline, truth in engineering, and other variations thereof, BMW, the ultimate driving machine. So you have to have that credibility. You got to have that superb engineering before people can believe this is a true luxury car.
But okay, if we look at the CTS and we look at the ATS, and I know I've written about it, and you guys have talked about it, is again, you look at the engineering of those two vehicles, magnificent. Okay, they've done all that stuff. I mean, it's they've looked at it gram by gram. They've taken it's just like it's great. And how's that working out for them in the market?
Not at all.
And if I'm buying a luxury car, I'm buying a luxury car because of luxury. I'm not buying a luxury car because of welding.
But I think there may be a little bit of an inferiority complex at work, that BMW and Audi and Mercedes are so known as being well put together, that even though the Cadillacs are well put together, we have to shout that it is just to let the world know that we're competitive with them. So there may be a little bit of psychology at work there.
There could, but you raise a really good point, Gary, because the ATS and CTS are great examples of superbly engineered cars that have been duds in the marketplace, absolute duds. And so that does call into question, Cadillac's marketing strategy. It has not worked. Now, having said that, the new Escalade, which is also quite well engineered. I happen to be test driving one right now to see this 4G LTE and blah, 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 all that goes with it. It's a tank, but it's a beautiful tank.
Right.
Oh my God, is this thing? It's like a $93,000 beautiful tank.
I was in that thing.
And
you could live in it.
And they're selling like crazy. So is that because the Escalade, number one, it doesn't have letters and numbers with its name. It's the Escalade, or the Slade as it's become known. Is it because it's always been out there and it's quite the bling mobile, and it didn't even matter if they just made it so much better engineered? What's going on? Why is the Escalade working so well from a sales standpoint? ATS and CTS are dead in the water.
I think it's just because Americans love big and Americans love SUV, and it's Cadillac, it's all American, and it all fits together. And you don't have to compete with the Germans or Japanese. This is what we do versus, okay, those two cars you're thrown in with the rest of the world, and that mindset is, luxury car, Mercedes, BMW.
Right, and I would say, and to go back to our conversation before the break, that if you want to buy a luxury car that's a technology car, you buy the Model S, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. See, and this is the thing. No one ever talks about the Tesla as the all-aluminum Tesla, right?
Right.
And it is.
And
I mean,
it is.
And nobody talks about, I mean, those guys have probably done a more magnificent engineering job on that aluminum vehicle than Ford has with the aluminum F-150, okay? So there's like, this is an aluminum car, no compromise. And oh, by the way, we've got that 17-inch display, we've got these batteries that you're talking about, we've got the over-the-air up. Okay, nobody can touch that from a technology point of view. But what do? They hired the designer, Franz von Halseren, who worked at General Motors, and made a beautiful car. And you just look at that and say, that's a beautiful car. And oh, by the way, it drives like, and you don't care about the aluminum, you don't care about the electric motors, you just care that, wow, this is a real experience.
Well, what you're saying then is Cadillac is blowing it from a marketing standpoint.
Possibly. But I'm a guy who writes about engineering, so I mean, it's just. But that's the thing that strikes me. It's just like, come on, guys, you've got a luxury. And if you notice, and if you look at the, and you guys were at the Lincoln reveal, and if you read the rhetoric that they use to describe that car, I mean, every word drips of luxury, and even I think it was Mark Fields made a comment something about how others talk about the machine. We're not talking about the machine.
No, you're right. He did say that. He absolutely did.
And so it becomes more about this is aspirational luxury. This is quiet luxury. This is the sort of thing that you would relish.
So Cadillac needs their Matthew McConaughey.
I don't think Matthew McConaughey doesn't have anything to do with the new one.
Okay, what do some of the other viewers think about the hits and misses?
All right, so to give Maverick his due, so he thought a loser is the Nissan Maxima for a boring design.
Ooh, I wouldn't call it
I
boring.
wouldn't call it boring at all, no.
You can call it ugly.
Yeah. You may or may not know. I thought it was very sharp, yeah.
So Brett also says that the Nissan Maxima styling is a big loser.
When I didn't get a good look at the car except in pictures, and now that I'm seeing more of it, it's like that's going to take me a year or two to really digest the styling on that car.
But is this? I mean, if you look at basically any Nissan that has been introduced in the last 2 or 3 years, that these guys have really been pushing the styling in a way that few car companies have done.
I'd agree with that. Right.
And so, do you think that this is just a further pushing of this, and they're just basically saying, you know what? This is a crowded market. This is a noisy market. We're going to have to do something that's going to differentiate ourselves from what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, I mean, I was not bothered by the styling at all. I looked at it and I was somewhat wowed by it, but...
Well, I think you're onto something there, Gary, because that segment, the full-size car segment in the U.S. market is shrinking fast. I mean, you look at all the other I looked up the numbers on the Chevy Impala, which is not that old in the segment. I think it's probably the most recent, maybe.
Probably.
I mean, its sales are down sharply so far this year.
But I'm thinking in terms of styling, compare the Maxima with the Toyota Avalon, with the Impala, with the Taurus. I mean, its styling does make it stand out from that crowd.
And I think maybe that's why they said, hey, we got to have something that really wows the people, because the whole segment's shrinking. Unless we really stand out, we don't have a chance. That's my guess as to why they approached it there.
Yeah, the thing that I always wonder about with the Maxima is that the Maxima is always a really nice car and it's really well done. But when you look at the sticker, now I don't know what this new one's going to cost, but I'm assuming, well, it's stepped. In fact, they did announce the pricing on that, but I mean, it steps up rather rapidly when you get stuff. And I think if you're buying a car in that category, you want stuff, right?
Yeah.
That is somebody going to look at that and say, I think I'd rather buy an Infiniti. You know what I mean?
Good question.
You just sort of have that point that, you can either get the top of the line Maxima, or you can get the entry level Q50, I think it would be.
Yeah, soon to be Q30, but right now Q50.
Yeah, and so let's see. Steve says if people can tell the difference between the old and new Jaguar XF, it will be a winner.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. I mean, this is a totally new car. Brand spanking new, and it looks exactly like the old. Now, the Jaguar people say, no, it doesn't look exactly, but boy, to my eye, it's going to be hard to tell them apart. I don't understand.
Yeah, I didn't see a huge difference either.
you know, maybe they saved some tooling money and that's why they did it. Or maybe the public, maybe all the research said, don't touch my Jag, you know, just leave it, you know, you can make it better, but don't change the way it looks. I don't know.
Was this an all new or was it just a tweak?
No, it's all new. It's an all new architecture.
See, I was looking at it and thinking, oh, it was just a tweak.
No, well, that's what I thought.
yeah.
When I saw the pictures, it was like, oh, this is just a refresh. So we interviewed one of the guys at the Jaguar stand, and he ran us through the thing, and it's like, no, this is brand spanking new. There's like not much.
So why would a car company do that? I mean, okay, so if...
There's only two reasons. Either you don't have the money to do all new tooling, or your customers said, don't you dare touch this.
All right, so if your customers say, don't you dare touch this, we like the way this looks, but you know you have to improve it. I mean, unless there are some structural issues in terms of what you can or cannot do under the hood or on the interior in terms of, you know, you have the fixed IP and you maybe can't put, you know, a new, I don't know, 17-inch screener in there or something like that because, you know, you've got HVAC ducts running. I mean, just like, so why don't you just basically keep the car and just put new stuff in it and then just call it, you know, XF and then put a, I don't know, A behind it or something?
I don't know.
I mean, and you'd save a lot of money. You'd be able to get all kinds of stuff in it. Because, I mean, to just do the same thing over again. So if you got the new one and I have the old one and we both pull in to someplace.
I want something special. I don't want my car
right,
to
and
look
John
like
says, oh, you guys have your, you know, your XFs. You know, and it's just like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, but mine is the new one.
Right. It's just, yes, that's not a good thing.
Okay, who else?
Armand says the advanced engineering in the Cadillac CT6 is the winner.
I'm blown away by it. I mean, but that's me, you know.
And Armand says the loser is the face of the Scion IA. Now
Well,
that's the little sedan. So Scion had the two cars. They had the IM,
Yeah.
which is the hatchback, and then the IA, which was this.
Yeah.
Well, there we can see it.
There's
They
yes,
didn't
Ben's
make
got
it to
up
the
on
Scion
screen right now.
exhibit, so.
It's got kind of a sourpuss front end to it, you know, look to it. I like it. I actually like the front end. It's not like anything else on the road. Of course, I'm not going to go out and buy one either, so I don't know. They appealed to me, but I'm not their target audience. But I do like that look. It's completely different from anything that Toyota has shown before.
Dan the Man says Lincoln Continental is the winner of the show. So.
Boy, they got more media coverage out of that show
Sure
than
did.
anybody, by far.
All right, so what do you guys think whether the real car will look like that car?
My guess is it will look very close to that car. I mean, you know, you had the little table in the back for your computer and things like that. Those little things may go away, but they made such a big deal out of this is what we did with the interior, this is this. It would be a major disappointment if it didn't look pretty close to that vehicle.
I think it'll look very similar. They really blinged that car up for the show. I got to talk with Kumar Gaholtra, who's the president of the Lincoln Motor Company. I say that with a somewhat smirk on my face because I don't yet quite consider it its own standalone company. Nonetheless, I do like the direction that they're going with Lincoln. But yeah, they're everything in the interior that's not fabric is chrome. It's way too much chrome. I mean, in a sunny day, you're not going to even be able to see anything with the reflection coming off the chrome. Also, like Ben's got this on the screen right now, all that is chrome. It's just going to be too hard on your eyes. It's a concept car. And if you look at on the outside of it, there's, especially down around the rockers and the like, there's a lot of chrome. And one aspect that they kept pointing out but saying, we don't think we're going to have this for production, is the chrome surround of the taillights. When you put on the brakes, actually the light comes through there. Oh, here we got the picture up. So you see all that chrome at the lower end of the fascia, and if you look down the rockers, I think that's, and here's the chrome around the taillights, which when you put on the brakes, see the light comes through it. They're working on that, but they strongly hinted not going to be ready for production.
I think the light I think on the new Edge, the light goes across on that, from the tail light across, and you buy the upper level version of that car? I think they've got that.
Well, I don't
It doesn't
think
work like that exactly,
yeah.
but I mean,
it may go traverse the entire car.
all right, here's a question for you guys. Okay, so we look at the Continental. It's got an entirely new grille. We've got the current MKZ out there, which has a variant on the grille that they've been using with the horizontal bars after they gave up on the vertical bars, and now they've gone to, it's like, is that going to cause problems when somebody goes into the dealership?
Well, you know, designers always like to have a family resemblance, and BMW is probably the best at retaining that kidney grille all the way since the 1920s forward. But if you look at it over the years, it's
Right.
evolved, but it's still the kidney grille. On the BMW i8 and the i3, even though they're electric and you don't need a grille, they've got those kidney grills. So, and I know a few years ago when we had Jack Telnack on the show, former head of design of Lincoln, they had invited him in to say, what do you think, you know, what we're doing? And he said he liked that eagle wings or the bow wave grill that they've been using. And he said, work with it. You really got something there. Well, clearly they felt, no, they had to break clean and change. And I think great design is great design, and it doesn't matter if it maintains the tradition or keeps a family resemblance. If it looks great, just go with it.
I like the new grille. I think it gives it a classier look. I think the older one was a little too brash. I think this mutes it down a little bit, and just, to me, it adds a touch of class where the previous iterations were a little bit too over the top.
Yeah. Hey, Carmen tells me we got a phone call. Let's bring in the phoner.
Hi, John. This is Jonathan out in Old Japan. You asked
All right, Jonathan.
why the ATS and CTS, wonderful cars as they are not selling as well as they could be or should be compared to BMW and other luxury makers. It's the marketing arm of Cadillac that has allowed the ATS and CTS to lease for literally 10 to 15 to 20% subsidized lease rates higher than the corresponding BMW, let's say 320, all-wheel drive, sunroof, and heated seats. The BMW compared to the ATS is literally 10% less per month, same money down on the East Coast. Who's going to buy or lease a Cadillac, which this whole segment is all about, when it costs 10% more to lease a Cadillac on the East Coast than it does to lease a comparable BMW model? And that goes for the 5 Series versus the CTS, etc. BMW packages a popular group package, ships it over, and leases it 10% less than Cadillac did. When the ATS shipped originally, when it launched, they ran a similar lease package, and the ATS was booming. As soon as they went back to their traditional non-subsidized lease, stripper model lease, that was 10% more than the BMW, Cadillac sales faltered. That's a marketing issue, but it's really a popular option group lease issue that needs to be addressed by Cadillac. That's my opinion. Hope you agree. Have a nice day. Thanks for the show.
Awesome, Jonathan. Awesome, awesome as always. I think he's really onto something there. And that's something that we do have to pay more attention to. What's the real lease price out on the ground here? Because about a month ago, I did something on Autoline Daily looking at Volkswagen lease prices in the U.S., and they're like unaffordable, unless on the company's been specifically subventing, incentivizing leases on the Golf, and the Golf lease looked pretty good, but the Jetta was crazy. The rest of the stuff was crazy. I think he's onto something here. He's got a great question. If a Cadillac lease is 10% more on the East Coast at least, yeah, why are you going to pay more? They got to be probably 15, 20% below BMW, Audi, and Mercedes to make headway.
Exclusivity.
Well, yeah, and I'm not sure how you handle that. I mean, that speaks to residuals. And if you start subventing or subsidizing these leases, that can get you into trouble a few years down the line, too. So That's a very interesting issue that he just raised.
So speaking of luxurious cars, we got a email earlier in the week from Goat Rope, who was pointing out, talking about Porsches, and said for the first quarter, 54.4% of Porsches sold have been SUVs. 65.5% of Porsches sold have been four doors. 84.5% have automatic transmissions, but 15.5% of Porsches sold in the U.S. and Canada had manual transmissions. So basically, leading to the point of, gee whiz, you think of Porsche and you're not thinking of automatic transmissions in an SUV. Yeah. You're thinking of a sports car, but then he makes the point, if SUVs and slush boxes, meaning the automatics, generate enough money for the Boxster Spider development and production, then I won't whine. I think that's, but isn't it a very interesting thing about how, like, luxury brands like Porsche certainly got to be considered in that space.
It's extraordinary what the VW Group has done with Porsche. I mean, I remember when Porsche sold 50,000 cars globally, and that wasn't all that long ago. Now they're doing 200,000 globally, and they are just minting money. So they've been able to pull it off, and, much to my surprise, of having so many automatic transmission vehicles and so many non-sports car people aspiring to the brand. Look, at the end of the day, it's all about business, right?
I'm just going to say exclusivity is great, cash is better.
Yeah. That's good.
That's very good.
And that's probably a great place to end the show. But Jeff Gilbert from WWJ News Radio 950, great having you on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good. And Gary, let's do this again next week.
Next week.
Okay.
Stay healthy.
So all of you, tune back in.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Henkel, excellence is our passion.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live. Get your daily news fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There is all that and much more at Autoline.tv.